Where are we? Hang on a minute. I've lost my notes. There we go. Right. So, hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of HR Hacks and Halos. This is a podcast changing company culture one conversation at a time. I'm your host, Juven Dempsey. Leading with kindness isn't just a nice to have in business, it's a game changer. And today I've got a really inspiring guest joining me. I'm joined by Amisha Green. She's not only the founder and CEO of Bookshelf Limited, she's also the winner of this year's Leadership with Kindness Award. Now, the award isn't just about leadership to create a thriving workplace culture. That's obviously very much part of it, but it's also setting a benchmark for what really it means to lead with empathy, integrity, and genuine care. So let's dive in and find out more about how Amisha has created a people-first culture at her business and the power of kindness in leadership. So Amisha, welcome so much to the show. It's a real pleasure and honor for me to have you here.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It's really nice to be here.
And congratulations on winning the award, by the way.
Thank you.
Great. So perhaps, Amisha, can you kind of just share a little bit by telling us a little bit about yourself, how you started your business and your journey as a leader?
Yeah, of course. I'll try to give the give the abridged version, or we'll be here all day. But yeah, I guess I started out. I grew up with my mom, a single parent family, and my mom was a huge inspiration to me. So when I was growing up, she was a lorry driver and a barmaid, and she put herself through multiple degrees to become a senior mental health university lecturer.
Right.
And she really kind of taught me the power of sort of how you can really change your life and how you can achieve anything. But she also, as a child, she gave me philosophy books to read, which probably sounds really strange. I named my teddy bears after philosophers, but I really grew up with this concept that, we're here to make the world a better place for other people. And, this idea of being a virtuous person. And I read a lot of the ancient Greeks who talk about virtue. So yeah, I just grew up from a very young age, sort of, believing in the concept of just being a good person and making a difference in the world. And I knew that I wanted to do that in some way. And I'd always loved books. So it was just figuring out that path. And it was a very meandering path to get there. But I did a degree in English, literature and philosophy. And then I actually ended up working in HR for around 5 years.
Right. Yes.
Various HR roles, but I was always freelancing alongside those jobs because I knew that I wanted to work in publishing. So I worked for a publisher in-house for a couple of years. And then I spent the year as a digital nomad traveling the world and freelancing. And then when I came back from traveling, I was a full-time freelancer for a few years, but the business was growing. So yeah, I started my own company, and that was, I can't believe it was 7 years ago. And I've been growing and developing the company since then.
That's amazing. That's a really, as you say, quite a convoluted journey, starting off in HR, which is the space that I kind of occupy as well, but actually kind of using that then to kind of springboard into the business that you really wanted to do. It's really interesting that your mum was a lorry driver. I suppose that would have been back in the sort of late 70s, 80s, I suppose. I don't know if that's correct, but that must have been quite an interesting kind of career choice for her at the time.
Yeah, it's amazing. So yeah, as you say, it was kind of the mid-80s, and yeah, she's just one of these people who's just, yeah, she will do, kind of do whatever she can to, to change her life really. And as I said, she's been a huge source of inspiration for me in, just believing
Absolutely.
that you can do whatever you set your mind to.
Must have been kind of very much on leading the way into, there couldn't have been that many lady lorry drivers around at the time.
Yeah, I wouldn't have thought so. And also we're both about 5 foot, so the idea of driving a HGV lorry is quite something.
And tell me, where did her passion then for philosophy come from? To give you those books, for you to name your teddy bears after the philosophers. Where did that inspiration for her come from?
Yeah, do you know? I actually don't know. I haven't asked her. I'm going to have to go back and ask her what inspired her. And I mean, she's always loved reading as well, but I don't know what got her particularly into philosophy, because it's not a subject I think that many people are particularly interested in. Yeah, I'm actually the subject lead for university taster courses on philosophy at the moment. There's a startup called Knownness who are aiming to give students an insight into various degrees, and I'm writing their philosophy course. So hopefully more people will get an insight into philosophy and like how it can change their lives and change the world.
Brilliant. And what were your teddy bears called, by the way?
So there was a mouse called Derrida, there was a whale called Plato, there was a dinosaur called Socrates. It's quite the range.
Yeah, that's amazing. I must admit, I had 2 teddy bears, and one was called Aristotle and the other was called Archimedes.
Oh, this is
Not
amazing.
because I had any particular passion about philosophy. It's just that I used to like Greek mythology, and I then named my teddy bears after two of the characters, I suppose, that I'd kind of heard about from
Oh, I love
those.
that. Oh, our teddy bears could have been friends. That's amazing.
They could have been friends. Yeah, that's really good. So let's just go back then to the whole leadership approach and the kindness in leadership that I'm really, really interested. What does that actually mean for you? What does it mean in terms of your leadership approach around kindness?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think for me, it's kind of having that like people focus first, and that goes for, our team, but also our customers. It's
Mm,
just, yeah, beginning with thinking about other people rather than thinking about the business or as, profit or something like that. So, yeah, things like listening to other people and, just going to them and asking them questions and asking them what they would prefer and what they would like from you as a leader.
yeah.
Yeah, really just considering other people as the starting point for your actions.
Right. Yes, yes, yeah. I like that. And how do you think that manifests itself in terms of, on a typical day? How would that kind of manifest itself, do you think?
Yeah, so we're a mostly remote team. We do co-work once a week, which is really lovely. But some of our team aren't based in the UK or aren't based in Birmingham like
Mm,
us. So I think it's kind of that regular communication. So we have WhatsApp groups and we voice note each other a lot because I think it's different voice noting and actually
yeah.
having that sense of having a conversation compared to just sending an email or just a message or something like that. So yeah, a lot of it is just down to having a more personable approach. So I did work in corporate backgrounds and I've been part of corporate cultures. And while I think, that can be very effective in some ways, I didn't want my company to have a corporate culture. I wanted it to feel, much more kind of friendly and close knit and very welcoming. And, yeah, so our approach is just to be kind of approachable and for everyone to feel like they have a place
Yeah.
and that they can be themselves. And we take on a lot of young people through internships with like local universities and a few charities,
Right.
and all of the feedback we get is like, oh wow, it's just so comfortable, I can be myself and I really feel like you care. And it's so nice to get that feedback because
Yeah.
that's what we're aiming for. We want people to feel that if they have a problem in their work life or even in their personal life, that they can come and talk to us about it. Or if they're struggling with their mental health or if they're finding something difficult, that the door's always open for them to come and talk to us and to seek that support. Yeah, I think
Yeah.
it's different to cultures I've experienced in the past, but I wanted people, yeah, to really feel that sense of belonging.
Yeah. So would you say it has a bit of a family feel to it, or is that far too simplistic?
No, I think a family feel is a really good way to describe it. And so it's running the business, it's myself and Niall, who's my life and business partner. So it already
Oh,
feels like a family business because we're
wow.
partners. But yeah, even with our team, we're very, very tight knit as a team, and it's a small team. We have like a core team of 4 or 5, and then we have around 5 project based freelancers. But even our freelancers, they're part of our team as well. So it definitely has more of, yeah, like a small family business feel.
Yeah, yeah. And that's interesting that you work with your partner, your life partner and your business partner, obviously the same individual. That must be quite rewarding, but also challenging at times.
Yeah, it's funny because there's actually quite a lot of like husband and wife and partner teams in Birmingham, so we're definitely not the only ones. And I
It's
think,
a
yeah,
Birmingham thing, obviously.
yes, yeah. And I think as long as your skills and your approach complement each other, it can work really well. And so I think, we bring kind of different skill sets to the business. And the reason, that Niall joined the business was because he's really, kind of organized and methodical. And I'm like yeah, I've got tons of ideas, but I can be very, very disorganized. So,
Right. Yeah, yeah.
kind
So
of
you
having that.
complement one another.
Yes,
So
definitely.
you're the visionary and he tends to help bring it all together into some kind of
Yeah.
action.
Yeah, makes it happen.
Yeah, that's brilliant. That's brilliant. It's really nice to actually hear that. And then the fact that you guys have both got your own special kind of superpowers, I suppose, that kind of help drive the business forward, but coming at it from different kind of perspectives.
Yeah, totally. But as you say, it does have its challenges. And I think, especially around that divide and work-life balance,
Yeah.
when you
Yeah.
work together and you live together, it's like, where does life, home life begin and the business
Yeah.
end? So
Yeah.
I think that's, probably a challenge for most people in general, I would say these days, especially with
Yeah.
people working from home.
But so I suppose switching off in terms of business and then, you two being partners in life can become quite blurred, I suppose. And
Yes,
and yeah,
definitely.
understand. Well, again, I want to, congratulate you on winning the Leadership in Kindness award. What does the recognition of that award actually mean to you personally and your business?
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you. Yeah, I was really surprised, yeah, to be chosen. And I think the main thing for me was even the concept that businesses, these big businesses like KPMG are recognizing kindness in leaders.
Hmm.
Because I think when I was growing up, I never saw myself as, someone who would start a business. And all of the people I saw running companies, they seemed very cutthroat and,
Mm.
like being a leader involved trampling on other people, and that's never something that I wanted. So I could never see myself becoming that type of leader, or even starting a company really. So I think the fact that, yeah, that there are organizations out there who are recognizing people who are leading with kindness, I think that's really important, because it shows actually kindness is something that we want to encourage as a society, and that
Mm.
we're going to recognize people who are actually doing that. So yeah, I think it was just that overall concept that we're valuing kindness was really important to me. And then personally, it was obviously just really, really nice to be chosen. It was actually one of my team who nominated me for it, and then all of the team had to kind of put together a statement about, yeah, kind of about me and my approach to leadership. So
Yeah.
I it was, yeah, it was really nice to be recognized by my team, and then
Yeah.
obviously to be chosen.
Brilliant. Who are you up against?
I actually don't know. That's a good question. So they don't really tell you, but
But it was obviously the likes of KPMG who sponsor the award and were part of the panel. Is that why you specifically picked out them?
yes. So yeah, the award is sponsored by KPMG, and it's a
Right.
list that they produce.
Yeah, yeah. Do you think there's a specific sort of moment or something that you've done in terms of an initiative that might have contributed to your team actually putting you forward and then to you winning the award?
I'm not sure. I think it was just quite a general feedback. But I think, from what I've heard of the team, and as I say, the feedback I've received from them, I think it is just creating that environment where they feel able to be themselves,
Yeah.
and yeah, and to kind of come to me if they have problems, and yeah, just that environment of just being really welcoming. And we, even with the authors we work with, some of our authors speak English as a second or third language, or they're dyslexic or neurodivergent, and we just welcome everybody.
Mm.
And we really appreciate everybody as the unique individuals that they are. So
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
it's really that
And
comes.
that's quite an interesting thing you've said there, actually, because that just proves, doesn't it, that actually people say that there's a book in absolutely every single one of us, isn't there? So it doesn't really matter what kind of background or what your particular skills are. There's always something that you can write about that's really kind of central to you and can help to define you that you could maybe help bring out.
Yeah, our slogan is actually, everyone has a book in them. Are you ready to write yours? Because I really do believe that, everyone has some wisdom that they can share with people, their individual life story, and something in that will inspire others. So I really do believe,
Yeah.
everyone does have a book in them, and it's a lot easier these days to write it than, people think, or than it used to be.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, because there are many. I think in the sort of days gone by, certainly when I was much younger, you'd have to get a deal with a publishing house, and it was convoluted, and they were kind of, you had to number of books that people would kind of like reject before you got there, and that was really off-putting. Whereas now with self-publishing, the barriers have really opened up, haven't they? Sorry, excuse me. Sorry, that'll have to get cut out. I suppose the barriers have kind of come down, haven't they, to publishing and to creating your book?
Yeah, absolutely. I think when Amazon, opened the whole Kindle Direct Publishing about 15 years ago, it just completely removed the barriers. And it's so nice that anyone anywhere can publish a book now. So it's, yeah, I think it's really changed the industry. And as you say,
Yeah.
the vast majority of people are being rejected by traditional publishers. And now, particularly because they don't have a big enough audience, big enough social media following. But, I believe that really everyone has something amazing that they can share with the world. And it shouldn't
Mm.
matter how many followers you have on social media, whether that doesn't make the message, any more
Yes.
or less important.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right there. And, quite frankly, if I can write a book, then I think anyone can write a book. And I was never the best writer in the world, to be quite frank with you.
Yeah, a lot of our authors, a lot of them they haven't written since school and they don't feel like natural writers. They're not the creative kind of writer side where they want to write novels. But yeah, they have these ideas to share with the world or an approach or, just something that will change people's lives. And that's the key thing.
Absolutely, absolutely. So let's just go back to you and kindness in leadership. Do you think that there was a pivotal start again? Sorry. Let's just go back to leadership in kindness for a moment. Do you think there was a pivotal moment, perhaps in your life or in your sort of the leadership that you were kind of developing as your business was flourishing, that made you realize that kindness is actually the thing that is almost like one of your superpowers? Do you think that was something that was there a moment in your journey that perhaps made you think, yeah, this is actually the best way to be as a leader?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question. I don't think there was a moment. I think it's just something that probably comes quite naturally to me because, it's something that I had since childhood and it's kind of how I developed as a person. So for me, there's almost no other way to be in business. I can't envision a world where I would have, been one of those really cutthroat leaders. It just
Yeah.
seems completely natural to me that you would run a business with kindness.
Yeah.
So yeah, I can't think of a pivotal moment exactly, but it is always really nice when you do, kind of get the feedback that it does make a difference to people and that they do really appreciate it.
Yeah, yeah. So it's just a natural part of you. You're just being a leader as you are as human being, as you are as you would normally interact with anyone, in life, I suppose.
Yeah, that's a really good way to put it. Yeah, I can't imagine being a different person when I step into the office compared
Yeah.
to who I am, in day-to-day life.
Mm. Mm. But I suppose that, I mean, the flip side to that is that some people might see kindness almost as a weakness in leadership. What's your take on that?
Yeah, I've heard that quite a lot. And I think it is a statement, that's kind of banded around. I guess as someone who's interested in words, I would go back to how we define each of those things. So what are we defining as kindness? What are we defining as weakness? What are we defining as leadership? And I think if you have that definition of kindness being a pushover, and letting yourself, be have your kind of decisions, pushed back on or being trampled over in terms of your own opinions, then I can see why someone might develop the idea that it's a weakness. But I
Mm.
think that's based on, I guess, a misunderstanding of what kindness is. It
Yeah.
doesn't necessarily mean being a pushover. I think it can mean just being considerate of others
Yeah.
and being a considerate person without having those negative connotations.
Yeah.
So yeah, I personally wouldn't see it as a weakness because I think the way I define kindness is in a really positive way. But I
Mhm.
could see that if someone defined it in a negative way, that they would end up with a different impression.
Yeah, and I think you're spot on there. It is about definition, isn't it? Kindness is one person's kindness could mean something very, very different to another person. So it's how that their take on that word and how that then shows up in terms of the way they lead their teams, how they lead in work, in life, can be very different from one person and another. So you're absolutely right. It's the full package, isn't it, in terms of how you're defining it and then how you show up in the space of kindship. It's how you show up in the space of kindness when you're dealing with other people. Have
Yeah,
you ever faced any, I mean, you also talked about pushback. Have you sort of faced any pushback for the way that you've, worked with people with that level of kindness?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. Not that I can think of. I think the challenge probably is that when you do lead with kindness, it can be more difficult to set those boundaries. And there still do need to be boundaries. Just because you're leading with kindness doesn't mean that, anything goes. So I think the challenge is really around how you set those boundaries and how you still do that with kindness. And I think that's probably more of a challenge for people who are leading with kindness compared to those who aren't, because
Yeah.
for them, it's perhaps a bit more obvious how to set those boundaries. So yeah, I do think it, in some ways it probably makes it more difficult, to be a business owner and particularly to make some of those business decisions.
Yeah, and that again, that's a nice segue in terms of the question that I was going to ask you next, which is when business gets tough because, it does. Sometimes actually focusing in on that people first kind of ethos or the kindness ethos can get quite strained. And therefore it's a balancing act, is it, in terms of sometimes needing to be tough versus needing to be kind, and how you would then navigate through that.
Yeah, I think a balancing act is a really good way to describe it because, being a business owner and especially a small business owner and like
Yeah.
in the current, current economic climate, it is very difficult. And being realistic, you do have to consider the business because, if you can't keep the lights on in the business, then there isn't a job for people to even come into. So leading with kindness then isn't even relevant because you're not leading anymore because you don't have a company. So I think it comes back to that kind of really common analogy of like you've got to fit your own, your own mask first, and you do have to make sure the company keeps running so that those jobs are there for people, to work in. So I think it is a really difficult balance of making sure you are,
Mm.
prioritizing the business and making sure the business keeps running, but
Yeah.
also keeping your staff in the loop and making them aware, and making sure you are kind of being just being as open and transparent as possible. So I think for me a lot of kind of the concept of kindness is around that openness and
Mm.
transparency, and maybe other people don't define it in that way, but for me that's a kind of a really integral part of it. And so we probably over communicate with our team more so than other businesses, and certainly in those corporate environments I've been in, there's very little communication from the top in terms of the kind of direction the business is heading in and things like
Yeah.
job stability.
Yeah.
And I've been part of lots of restructures, and you always as the employee seem to find out last, and that's not
So true.
yeah, that's not something that I would want for the company. So,
Yeah.
we do try to communicate like, how is the company doing, and yeah, just make people as informed as possible really, because
Yeah.
I think that is part of leading with kindness.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And again, as a business owner, have you found any measurable benefits by being kinder? For example, in terms of turnover or engagement, how is it actually manifesting on the bottom line as far as you're concerned in terms?
Yeah, good question. So I think it's probably most noticeable when it comes to recruitment
Yeah,
because we talk a lot around our values and what we're like as a company and what our culture is. And so when we do advertise, we get so many applicants. So I think the first year that we advertised internships, we had 2 internship positions available and we had 176 applications.
wow.
And compared to other companies that was it was a crazy amount, but it was really nice because it showed how many people would like to work for us and how many people want to be in that environment. And then the feedback we get with people who have finished their internships is always like how much they enjoyed that culture,
Mm.
especially compared to maybe other organizations they've worked in. So I definitely think around that kind of recruitment and retention side of things,
Mhm.
we've touch wood, we've not had anyone really want to leave yet. So and I know retention can be very difficult for companies, but I think when you create that environment, hopefully people want to stay,
Yeah.
and they want to join and and be part of the journey. So definitely around there. And I think kind of from the client facing perspective, we really do like to work with like-minded authors, so people who are also trying to make the world a better place. And I think that approach also makes a difference to them because the fact that we live by our values
Mm.
is really important if somebody's choosing what kind of company they want to represent their book. And little things like we donate to protect 10 acres of rainforest for every author we work with because the publishing industry is still quite destructive,
Yeah.
and like recommending FSC certified printing companies who are local as well, so they're not shipping the books thousands of miles. So little things like that, they do make a difference in terms of authors who want to work with us as well, because maybe they want to work with more ethically driven companies. So I think
Mm.
it's that kind of kindness to the planet as well is like a really big thing for us, and trying to encourage people within our industry to take up more sustainable practices. So I
Yeah.
definitely think that adds to the bottom line in terms of bringing on authors who also want that more
Mm.
sustainable approach.
Yeah, and that's really good. I hadn't really seen it like that before, but you are not only leading with kindness, but you're actually leading with a quite a strong values focus as well.
Yeah, I think values has been a really key thing for me since starting the business. And, I know a lot of people when they start a company maybe don't think about the value side of things. Maybe that's something that emerges. But for me, that was very strong from the beginning, probably coming from that more like philosophical background. I probably had my values list and, the mission statement written out kind of quite early in the journey. And it's something I've helped other business owners to develop as well since then. So we're part of a lot of entrepreneur communities, and we help out other kind of people who are like new to business or kind of young aspiring entrepreneurs, and we do talk to them around the kind of value side of things and how you can build that into your business.
And what advice do you give to them?
So I think it's really like kind of knowing what's important to them, with values. There's an endless list. I think if you look it up, there's probably like 100, 150 of them. So, yeah, really narrowing down which of those are most important to you. And I think it will be different for each of us. You can pick kind of 3 to 5, or maybe even kind of 7 core values. And then I think making sure you're building those into your business decisions is really important. So if you're looking to source some kind of, materials or supplies, and you have that value around sustainability, then it very much guides, what type of companies are you going to source those products from. And we've only, produced a few kind of small pieces of sort of merchandise. So we have like a tote bag, and it's completely 100% recycled. It's using sustainable inks. It was literally a company from down the road where I grew up, a very small company as well. So for me, it made that decision so much easier because, if you're immediately kind of coming from the perspective of your values, it narrows down, all of those decisions for you. So I think it can really help guide people on their business journey and the things they want to pursue and the things that they're not sure about.
So not only kindness to people, i.e. your team, but also kindness to the planet and the ecosystem, a kind of local ecosystem that you're actually helping to build and to maintain its future and profitability as well.
Yeah, definitely. Buying from other small businesses is again really important to me because I think it's very difficult for small business owners. And, the more we can help out, if I go out to a cafe, I'd much rather go to an independent. And I think that follows through.
Sorry about that.
It's
I
okay.
thought it had shut down. Sorry about that.
No.
I've lost my train of thought now as well. We were on a bit of a roll. So, Amisha, what kind of advice would you give to other business leaders who want to adopt more of a kinder approach to their leadership style, but don't really know where to start?
Yeah, I would, first of all, I would say to them, like, definitely do it. I know it can be like a kind of scary sort of idea of, will this work out? But I've only seen good things from it. So yeah, I would say the first thing would be to sit down with your team and make a point of saying, look, I want to lead with kindness. And what can I do to help you? What would you like from me? And just coming from that perspective of actually like kind of pausing and then, kind of setting the tone going forward and actually asking people what they want from you. Because I think sometimes we can think we're being kind, but it isn't what the other person actually wants. And again, it comes back to us having our own definition of what kindness is. So yeah, actually asking people, what does kindness look like to them? And, when I was applying for the award, I remember asking the team what they thought kindness was. So I think it's, understanding what kindness is for that individual and what they actually want from you, because it might not be what you think. And, just making note of that and trying to personalize, kind of the experience that each person in your team wants and thinking how you can deliver that. And it might not be possible to do everything they ask for. Some of those things might be outside your remit or just not possible in the kind of the current business climate. But yeah, just having that much more personal approach, I think that's what it comes down to for me. It's more personalized and kind of tailored to the individual.
Yeah, absolutely. And actually even engaging in that conversation with them in terms of what do they want to see in terms of a kinder leadership style and approach is a kind thing in itself, because you're being inclusive. You're actually asking their opinion and making them part of that decision making, which can be really good in terms of the company culture that you're looking to create.
Yeah, and I think it shows that you're just being more intentional around it, because if you I mean, you could decide tomorrow you want to start leading with kindness, but maybe people won't notice for a while, because if you're not kind of explicitly telling them, it can be difficult for people to notice if you're doing something a bit differently. So I think actually having that conversation really helps people to feel appreciated, and as you
Yeah.
say, it's more included.
Yeah, and it's going to be quite a shock for them, I suspect, for leaders who are not traditionally kind, perhaps, suddenly say taking on this mantle of kindness and asking opinions could be quite a journey for them to take. So maybe small steps as well.
Yeah, definitely. I think just seeking that feedback is really important, because yeah, maybe your team already think you're leading with kindness and you don't even realize.
Yeah, you think you're just really hard, and perhaps you're
Yes,
not.
definitely.
So, what do you obviously, you're a natural leader. You kind of, my sense is that your kindness comes from yourself as an individual and how you like to live your life. And therefore, kindness is just an extension of you as an individual. How do you think the future of leadership could look like, as we move forward in this rather turbulent times, perhaps? And what are your hopes for leadership in the future?
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting question, considering, the current kind of political climate and what
Yeah.
we're seeing out there. And I guess I would hope that this is a blip, and, that we return to, that movement towards kind of leadership, because I think that's the direction we were going in. And it's a shame to see that we've moved away from that at the moment. And yeah, I really hope it's just a temporary thing. And from, kind of what I hear from people, I don't think there's many people on the street who actually like that style of leadership, and who respect it. So I think although that's what's happening on a kind of, higher global level, I don't think it's what most people actually want. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
I think it's a really challenging time, but I would hope that, people still continue to display kindness in leadership, because, certainly on like a small business level, I hope people see the benefits of doing it. And, that's probably what they would want for themselves as well. Most people don't really want to be led with an iron rod. And so why would you do that to other people?
Yes.
I think it is really difficult. And I think it goes back to your question about, putting, do you put business first, or how do you kind of balance the business profitability with the concept of leading with kindness? And I think it is a really challenging question. And, I think it's probably the most difficult question, because, we do have to think about business and profitability, but also think how we can balance that. And I'm not sure that, yeah, overall at the moment we've, on a higher level, that we've got that balance right. But I hope it doesn't put individuals off.
Yeah, no, I'd agree with you, because actually some people would say that that style of leadership is a strong style of leadership, but one person's strong is another person's real off-putting style of it's too strong. It's almost the opposite of what they would want from any leader. So I suppose you're right. Again, it goes back to the definition and the time and where you're at in your business journey. You're at a very good stage at the moment, where you're obviously a young company, you're growing, you're expanding, and it's a very exciting time in your business. If perhaps your business journey, your maturity is at a different stage, there could be a very different style of leadership that might be emerging, and that might be the very right stage of kind of leadership that needs to happen.
Yeah, I think it does go back to kind of constantly reevaluating. But, I would hope in the future that we do really grow as a business, and we want to create something really game changing in the publishing industry that democratizes the whole industry in the same
Yeah.
way that Amazon did 15 years ago. But I think, just really staying true to those values, because I would never want to become the kind of leader who's running this huge, huge company but has lost sight of those values. And, I've read stories about that happening, where people started out with those really good intentions, but along the way they've kind of lost sight of those. And yeah, I wouldn't want that to ever happen to me. So I think regularly checking in with your values, and it probably goes back to the ancient Greeks again, and Plato, talking about the philosopher kings and how he felt they were people who shouldn't be corrupted by power and responsibility. And I think as an individual, you have to be really aware of that potential. And, I don't think any of us can sit here and say, oh, there's no way that that would ever happen to me, because we don't know kind of how things will affect us. So I think, checking in with ourselves and making sure that we're still really staying true to those values, I think that's important. Kind of going back to your previous question about what I would like to see. I'm actually a judge for the Business Book Awards, and I've noticed a real move towards books on this kind of more kind of compassionate leadership. And the winner of last year's award was an author called Amy Walters Cohen, and she wrote a book called Ruthlessly Caring. Mm-hmm. And I think that's a real sign of, that move towards people wanting those like positive, caring, just a much kind of different style of leadership. So, and I've seen more of these books emerging. So I hope that's a sign, that we are kind of moving towards that recognition of kind leadership.
Yes. And then we just need to have that filter all the way through all of the other parts of business as well, in terms of the dichotomy that you have with regards to how we would lead, in terms of kindness, in terms of ourselves and bringing those into the workplace, but then also having the hard kind of rigidness around how we measure success and how we measure people against KPIs, etc. So there is a real kind of adjustment still to be made, isn't there, in terms of the hardness of performance and those measures versus how we then actually encourage people to become the best of themselves through kindness. And I think you're right, there's still an adjustment and a transition that we need to make.
Yeah, I completely agree. And as you said, I think that is another one of the challenges of, how you balance the kind of as you say, the more KPI sort of goal driven side with also leading with kindness. But I guess as an example, like one of my team at the beginning just didn't feel comfortable kind of talking directly to customers. And that's something I totally understand. It's not something that everybody feels able to do. And so we just moved towards that kind of really, really gradually and just introducing it a bit at a time. And now they work directly with customers, and like it's so fantastic to see kind of that change and that confidence building, and customers absolutely love working with them. And, then they get the positive feedback of how much the customers really enjoy it. And I think it doesn't have to be a case of you have this, this KPI from the beginning of you must do this, you must work directly with customers. Because if you know that someone doesn't feel comfortable doing that, why would you push them and make them feel really uncomfortable? Whereas you could kind of do it gradually and help them build their confidence to a point where they enjoy doing it and then they flourish in it. So I guess maybe it's a slower approach to things. Maybe it's it doesn't enable you to grow perhaps as quickly as it would if you have a very kind of KPI and goal driven business. And when I worked for the publisher, we had lots and lots of KPIs in place and daily targets. And, I think that can be good in a sense, but it's good when you already feel quite comfortable with the task you're doing. It's not so good if you don't feel comfortable with it. And I think sometimes it can just, make you feel as an individual like you're not performing. And I don't think that necessarily grows your confidence.
No, nor your business, because that person will probably leave, and then you have to recruit someone else, and then you start the whole cycle again. So you're absolutely right. There's a trade-off that needs to happen here. So Amisha, what's next for you and your company? Have you got any exciting projects or initiatives in the pipeline?
Yes. So as I mentioned, we are really hoping to kind of democratize the whole industry. And I can't say a huge amount about it. Obviously,
secret stuff, yeah.
And we have competitors. But I think, kind of one of the big challenges I've noticed is that people just can't afford professional services. And while it's absolutely wonderful that Amazon, kind of opened up the industry and made self-publishing possible, there's still a lack of kind of affordable services for authors who want to self-publish but want to do it professionally and want to end up with that finish like they would at a traditional publisher. And because traditional publishers are, so elitist still and so, difficult to access, I think there is a real gap in the market, for someone to solve that problem. So that's what we're working on. And I really hope it will make a huge difference and help so many more people just be able to tell their story or to share their wisdom or their approach with the world, but in, an affordable, accessible, inclusive way. So that's the future goal for the company.
Oh, it's amazing. And it's going to be wonderful to see how your company actually changes and kind of grows as a consequence of all of these exciting things going on.
Yeah, I would really hope so. I think there are so many problems that can be solved in the world. And we've always kind of come at business from the perspective of how can we solve people's problems and how can we make life better for people. And I think when you look at business from that approach, there are so many things that you could do,
Yeah.
and so many ways that you could make a difference in the world.
That's brilliant. Amisha, it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you today. It's been absolutely inspiring. And I just love how your stories is kind of almost proof in itself that sometimes kindness and leadership, it's not just like a fluffy thing. And Chara is very driven by fluffy things. But actually, through listening to you and seeing how you've actually put it into practice, it's actually a strategy that really transforms teams and can drive results and actually can create workplaces where obviously your team thrives and actually other people can learn from that as well. So, I want to really thank you for sharing that with me. If anyone wanted to make contact with you to either to talk more about the services that you offer or to talk more about this whole kindness in leadership thing that we've been talking about today, how can we make contact with you?
Yeah, of course. So the easiest way to find me is probably LinkedIn. Yeah, as you said, my name's Amisha Green, and I'm the founder of the Bookshelf. So I'm generally quite easy to find, and I very much welcome anyone getting in touch to talk about their book idea. So I offer a free call for anyone who just has an idea but doesn't know how to turn it into a book. And normally within around half an hour we can get clear on what that might be and how to get started. And I think that's the most difficult part for most people. So I'm more than happy to do that to help people. And I also I offer free mentoring for young people as well. Kind of if they're not sure what direction to take their career in, or if they're thinking of becoming a leader or an entrepreneur, but they don't know again kind of where to get started. So I'm more than happy, if anybody knows somebody or they would benefit from some mentoring, of course, like feel free to get in touch as well. But apart from that, thank you so much for having me on your podcast. It's been really nice to talk about kindness. I think it just is something that we don't talk about enough.
We don't. Yeah.
And yeah, as you say, like, I think it's made the biggest difference in my life when I've had, leaders who have taken that approach. And when I think back at my whole career, and when I worked in HR, I had one boss who, she's actually a really close friend now, but she just completely led with kindness, and she was an absolutely fantastic kind of boss in the sense of she really got the best out of me, and she did set me goals, but she just really led with that, that approach of kindness. I think it makes such a difference, when you look back at your career, you remember those people. Maybe you remember the people who didn't treat you with kindness, and you remember those but for a different reason. But I think, those are the people who bring the best out of you, and hopefully have the biggest positive impact on your career.
Yeah.
So I really hope that there are more leaders out there who want to start leading with kindness and who want to take that approach to make a difference to the lives of their team.
Absolutely, because your point about mentoring is such a valid one, because you're absolutely right. Actually sharing how you do leadership with the next generation, with the people around you, actually just means that message becomes louder and louder and gets shared more widely. But also to help people and to mentor them and coach them in terms of what makes better leadership. So I think that's a really important message that you're sharing. And actually, it does also remind me of a mentor that I worked with many, many years ago, and she was equally as kind. And to see her in sharing her and coaching me and mentoring me, and then as I moved into another environment, and actually it was less kind, shall we say, the difference was quite stark, and you know which environment you want to work in and which one you want to avoid like the plague. So it does make the difference.
Definitely.
Brilliant. Amisha, thank you so much again. We will make sure that your contact details are in the show notes. So if people want to reach out to you, they'll know where to find you. But I want to thank you again for your time. And it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you.
And you, thank you so much for having me, Juvan.
Oh, right. Let's just stop that record.